Jason, as a partner in the Restructuring Group, I know this is a topic that's going to be very interesting to our clients. In fact, I think it's a topic that's very interesting to all of the firm's clients. So I'm really interested to hear what you've got to say today. I know you've been totally inundated with queries over the last couple of weeks, being a leading member of our firm's global sanctions team. So I'd just like to start with a sort of simple opening question, which is, as at today, which is the 10th of March, can you just talk us through the sanctions that have been imposed against Russia over the last couple of weeks?
Okay, well, it probably takes more time than we've got, but I can give a brief overview. I mean, the sanctions that we've seen imposed over the last couple of weeks represent kind of an unprecedented, coordinated effort between a number of countries in the world, primarily the U.S., the UK, and the EU, but also a host of others. And as far as which particular measures have been imposed, it's the proverbial kitchen sink from the sanctions world. I mean, it's assets freezes against many individuals as well as some key financial institutions. It's restrictions on capital markets access, both to Russian corporate enterprises, but also to the government itself. It's trade restrictions. More or less any item that might require an export license now is going to be essentially denied those licenses to Russia, and on into things that maybe we don't deal with ordinarily, but travel bans, overflight restrictions, you name it. It's been imposed in the last few weeks.
And what impact have those sanctions actually had?
Already a pretty significant one. On the Russian side of things, it may take a little time to develop, but we've already seen whole industries in Russia cut off from the banking system. We've seen the banks themselves cut off from communicating with one another through restrictions on financial messaging and access to certain markets, and we've seen an extraordinary move amongst the clients and contacts that we deal with to restrict their exposure or limit their exposure to the Russian market.
And what are the long-term impacts of those sanctions?
Increasing isolation for the Russian economy and honestly Russia's position in the world. There's already talk of an impending recession in the short term due to these measures.
And what are some of the key considerations for global clients of the firm as a result of the sanctions that are in place?
So our clients are looking right now at their exposure to Russia, but in a very broad sense. So supply chains, distribution networks, payment channels, you name it. And that's just on the legal side of things. Over the course of the last week or so, we've seen the questions begin to move from what can and can't I do under the new sanctions to we've made a decision to limit or withdraw from Russia. How do we do that? What are the implications for us?
And do they apply to cryptocurrency?
They do. Sanctions apply to assets really of any kind, and that's interpreted very broadly by sanctions authorities.
And what are the obligations for cryptocurrency operators with regard to sanctions?
Well, when it comes to assets freeze targets, their obligations are the same as anyone else's. They're made more difficult, however, because, it's a feature and a bug, the anonymity of cryptocurrency, and unfortunately there's no special provision for cryptocurrency operators in the sanctions. If you can't deal with someone's assets, you simply can't deal with someone's assets.
And on the individuals, we've heard lots in the press about sanctioning of particular individuals. What sort of difference? Does it make any real difference?
So from a policy perspective, the idea is obviously to put the squeeze on influential people in Russia, who the hope would communicate to political powers and the president himself that something has to change. From a legal perspective, what they do is not just freeze the individual's assets and restrict their ability to use them, access them, but in addition, any entity that they own or control is also would have their assets blocked, and third parties who might provide services or do business with them would be prohibited from doing business with them. And so there's a kind of a massive trickle-down effect from sanctioning a high net worth individual.
And how does that tie into, can you just talk us through the economic crime bill here in the UK?
Yeah, well, so this is a bill that has created a sort of register of foreign companies. The idea is to hope to be able to better identify those who hold interests in UK assets, and this is the sort of one more step toward transparency in foreign ownership.
Okay, and how much further can we go? Is there anything else that we could be doing to sort of develop this next steps?
Yeah, you've seen over the last couple of weeks, it's maybe difficult to say it's an incremental approach because it has moved very quickly, but we've seen this kind of layering of sanctions upon sanctions almost on a daily basis. They can go further. There are still major banks that are subject to some limitations, but not sort of more comprehensive ones. The real, and this I guess changed just a couple of days ago to some extent, but the real kind of untapped area, well, lightly tapped area, is oil and gas. And obviously this is complicated by Europe's dependence on Russian oil and gas, especially gas. But that's kind of the next front.
Okay, so I suppose in conclusion, as a sanctions expert, what would you say the key takeaways are for our clients?
So what we've been spending a lot of our time doing over the last couple of weeks is helping our clients to strategize. Well, first of all, take stock of what their touch points with Russia are, what's their exposure now, and how can they ensure that they're compliant with the sanctions that are coming into force today and tomorrow and the next day, but also a bit of strategizing for the future. You know, given that this may well be a long game, how can we protect the rest of their business from impact by disruption in supply chains from Russia or from payments from suppliers and distributors? It's a bit of trying to overlay the sanctions on the client's business. I've likened it to a bit of a bingo, right? You try to map out what your business looks like, and then when a new sanction's announced, you see whether one of the boxes is ticked. But that's really the game. It's risk assessment, which is a tired old word that people tend to glaze over when they hear, but that's the key, and that's what we've been assisting our clients in doing.